Ladies and gentlemen, at Global Town Hall, I'm moving ahead with a very important session of the day. The session or segment, I must say, is all about how the fundamentals of finance are going to change, not due to slowdown, but because of environment and climate change. Yes, globally, banks, finance heads, and investors are looking at sustainable finance far more aggressively than ever before. There is a rise in ESG funds, and banks are looking at companies which are carbon neutral. Let me explore all this with a very big name, Dr. Marc Faber. Dr. Faber, glad to have you here.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your program.
Thank you so much, Dr. Faber. And to begin with, my first question to you, Dr. Faber, is how do you see the impact of climate change on the finance? As I see a lot of BFSI companies are now talking about the climate change. They are looking at the companies with the carbon neutral in their balance sheet. So how do you see the impact of climate change on the finance?
Well, let me put it this way. You know, financial markets are markets that move according to fundamentals and not to empty talk by politicians and all kinds of gurus and advocates of new thinking and so forth. So over the last 12 months, which have been the best performing stocks? Coal stocks, coal. Even in India, you have coal companies that have been performing well. And the climate prophets or advocates and all this, I agree. We all have to make an effort and reduce the waste we have in the world, and we have to try to obtain clean energy. But, and here is the but, it's a question at what costs do we achieve this? If the cost of achieving clean energy is shortages and disruptions in industries and people freezing at home and having no access to power, then I say I rather pay the price and have it. You understand? The point is, in economics, there are different laws than in philosophy and in all kinds of beliefs. So let's put it this way. I think that oil stocks and fossil fuel companies will continue to go up, despite all the people that say one should avoid investing in these industries.
Noted your points. I think that was good to begin with, Mr. Dr. Faber. My next question is specifically about the ESG and the special focus specifically on the green projects. So what kind of changes do you see in the green finance, and what kind of strategy do you think the financial institutions will apply going ahead?
Well, the financial industry will be very busy because they have to finance all kinds of projects. But I want to say this about the rising energy prices and rising commodity prices, and that is the following. In the 60s, we had a rising trend in the rate of price increases, which we call commonly inflation. It's a symptom of inflation, but anyway, the rate of consumer price inflation was going up. And interest rates rose initially very slowly, but by 1970, they hit over 6% on the 10-year treasury in the US. And inflation at that time was also around 6%. And then interest rates in the 70s went up dramatically and peaked out at over 15% in 1981. The point is this: we're starting now with interest rates in the US on the 10 years at less than 2%. And inflation has been running now for almost a year at around 4%. These are government statistics. Be careful with what the government says, because it is never the truth, never, ever. Inflation is running for the typical household in Europe, in the US, at between 4 to 10% per annum. Do you have children? No children, and so forth and so on. So my view is that interest rates will have to go up substantially. Now, the Federal Reserve and other central banks they can suppress interest rates for a while. Okay, they can do that. But by doing so, the rate of inflation accelerates, and eventually it will hit the currency. And eventually interest rates will go up. It's like if we introduce today price controls in India, eventually when the price controls come off, prices will soar. So all these interventions, nobody has ever thought about them carefully. What are the consequences? It's like saying, we don't want to have a carbon emission. And then they go and produce natural gas. Natural gas produces huge clouds of methane. You can't see them with your eyes, but if you use infrared, you can see black smoke coming from the earth. So we have to be careful with all these idealists who say climate change, we have to do something about it. Well, they better be careful that they don't make it worse than it's already. And my view is that it is likely that all these climate change apostles will make things much worse than they already are.
Meaningful one, Dr. Faber. We have been reading the reports about how worse the climate change is going to be and what kind of impact it will have on Earth and many countries going ahead. But how serious are the financial institutions, considering, as you mentioned, and obviously that is the truth, that the interest rates are absolutely low. And it's not only in developed countries, but also many other parts of the world, the interest rates are absolutely low. But at least at this point, are they looking, are they, very serious about at least pushing the companies which are working specifically in the green criteria or following all those carbon neutral norms, because at least that can be a new segment for them also. So do you see the financial institutions are very serious about it?
Yes, I mean, financial institutions are sort of parasites that will go where the money is. You understand? Their ethics are like your ethics or mine or workers' ethics. They do anything, but they do anything for money. And so they'll do anything as long as they get paid for.
Absolutely.
But you have to be careful with all this, because the government now says, okay, we're going to subsidize this, we're going to subsidize that. At the end of the day, all these subsidies, someone has to pay for it. Usually they come out in the form of inflation. Now, if the rate of inflation is higher than your salary increase, in other words, inflation is say 10% consumer price inflation, your salary increase is only 5% per annum, then you lose out. And I'm telling you, with all these ESG investment type of ideals, they will lower the standard of living of everyone and of the poor people the most. That is the tragedy.
That's a very, very important statement, Dr. Faber, that you have made. Could you please elaborate more onto it? I'm really excited to listen to your explanation on that.
Well, look, I've lived enough years to have allowed me to travel the world and to see countries that were working under the planning economy. As you know, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and the first time I went to India is now almost more than 50 years ago. The economy was very socialist, and the consequences were in India that buildings in Mumbai, that was already a thriving city then, were dilapidated because the house owners could not increase the rent, and therefore they didn't repaint the building, they didn't fix anything. So you had the most wonderful buildings in perfect locations completely dilapidated. That is the planning economy, the price fixing mechanism, the subsidy system. And I've been to Eastern Europe. The young people today say, oh, the government needs to do this, the government needs to do that, and so forth. I can tell you something. In Eastern Europe and Russia, these are the countries where people say, oh, government, no, they shouldn't do anything because they did so many things. And it was a disaster. They were not 1-2 years behind the Western standards of living. They were 50 years behind the standards of living of East Germany, of West Germany. Why did so many East Germans want to go to West Germany? And why did they have to build a wall to keep them in East Germany? Because the standards of living were much higher in West Germany. It's like today, the socialists tell you how great Venezuela is. How many people from the US want to go to Venezuela? And how many from Venezuela and from all over the world want to get into the US? They don't want to go into the US to work. They want to get the social benefits. I want to say one thing very clearly. All these initiatives, including the government's reaction to COVID-19, is a gradual move towards more control by the government over people's individual rights and freedom. And we have many economists that have written about freedom and democracy and capitalism and democracy. You can only have a democracy when you have freedom and when you have a capitalistic system. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And India, you're a perfect example. India is moving ahead. Look at the stock market, it has done very well. Look at Europe, stock markets in Europe, the Euro stock index is no higher than in 1998, or maybe 5% higher. But what I'm saying is India is moving into the right direction, away from socialism to capitalism, to individual freedom, to individual initiative. And the Western world, these dumb, educated people who went to universities that are run by woke professors, they all want more socialism.
Right.
I wish them, I hope they'll get it, then they learn the lessons. And the lessons will be in lower standards of living. That I guarantee you.
Sure. Noted your points, Dr. Faber, and glad to see that your opinion about India. And we have been seeing a great rally in the stock market recently since got 60,000. And there is a whole lot of response that the Indian stock market is receiving. But my specific question, since we're discussing the sustainability and finance, Dr. Faber, is this, that at one side, we are discussing how the financial institutions are looking at the industry, which is trying to be a carbon neutral. But my question to you, Dr. Faber, is do you see the industry all over the world is also changing and trying to be carbon neutral? Because if the industry doesn't become carbon neutral, the BFSI companies or the financial institutions won't be able to lend them because they will have their own parameters and the criteria.
You're right. Companies will become or try to become carbon neutral. The question is, one company tries it, it's okay. If everybody does it, by how much does the energy usage increase? That is the question, because in economics is what one person does. If one person saves more, it's good for the economy. If everybody saves more, it's maybe not so good, because then the spending goes down and consumption goes down. So to answer your question, yes, a company, the board of directors sits there in their comfortable armchairs, leather chairs, and they say, yes, we have to get carbon neutral. Okay, wonderful. So they tell the manager, you have to do this, and they tell the other chief financial officer, you have to do that, because if you don't do it, The banks will no longer lend you money and the investors will no longer invest in your company. Okay, they do all this. What about the costs to the company? You think that company will be as efficient as before? They've been burdened with costs and consulting fees and legal fees and everything. And then the profits will go down. And when the profits go down and the costs go up, the inflation rate will pick up, of course. And the company will say, oh, our profits are down. We can't increase the salaries very much. So this is what I want to tell you. We can do anything. The question is, are we going to be better off or worse off? So as Milton Friedman said, you should not look at the government programs in the sense of the objective. You should look at the results. And I'm asking you all to consider the results. The governments don't care about the results. They only care about getting votes.
Right. Thank you so much for giving a very straightforward answer, Dr. Faber. I really appreciate and admire that. But tell us, are we going to be in a worst scenario or are we going to be in a good scenario? Because the companies will look at their profit. And in fact, there are certain companies which are absolutely saying that it will take us 10 to 15 years at least to reach to a level of a carbon neutral. So do you see the goal of carbon neutral, carbon zero is going to be really long for the institutions and the whole world as such?
I don't believe in carbon neutral. We can maybe reduce the emissions a little bit through modern technologies. But as I said, it will come at the cost. And you have to make sure that the cost does not all fall on poor people, because they are the ones that actually, in this whole economic boom throughout the world that began, say, around 1980, then countries opened up, first China and then Russia in 89, and then India somewhere in the mid-90s started to liberalize the economy. And especially under Modi, a lot of progress has been reached. There's no question about this. But the wealthy people, their horses have been much faster than the poor people. And that has created a climate in some countries that is very divisive. In India, it's not so bad because everybody today is better off than 20 years ago. You understand?
Right.
So people, if you are better off, what do you care whether this Tata is that much richer? It doesn't concern you, but you're also wealthier. You're doing better. You have a house, you have a car, you have whatever. And you have a wife and girlfriend and this and that. So if in a country everybody goes up and some go up faster than others, there's no problem. The problem in America is that some people have gone up and the vast majority has been in a gradual decline. We have statistics provided by the Federal Reserve, how much money people have when they are 35 years old and how much do they earn. At the moment, 35 years old have less money than the parents had and earn less than their parents did, inflation adjusted. But inflation adjusted by the figures by the government, not the true figures of inflation.
I have a very important question, and that question is specifically crafted for you, Dr. Faber. What is going to be your strategy? Are you looking at the stocks? Are you looking at the companies which are carrying or which are following some sustainable criteria? Are you going to bet on that? How are you looking at your investment strategy going forward?
Well, I have an overweight in oil.
Right.
I don't care what the analysts say. I don't care what Greta Thunberg says and so forth. It's none of my business. My business is to invest money profitably. And I will invest in sectors of the markets that are depressed. Coal was very depressed because they talked it down. Now the coal stocks have done fantastically well. Exactly what the climate apostles talked down.
Okay.
And two, I think that, we have to all realize life will never again be as free as we enjoyed in the, say, last 10 years.
Right.
First, we had ban on cigarette smoking in restaurants. And people said, okay, I don't care, I don't smoke. Okay, fine. Then airports became difficult to travel. They check whether you have a nail clipper, as if you could kill anyone with a nail clipper. At the same time, they serve you a can of Coca-Cola in the plane. You break the can in two, you have two deadly weapons in your hand. You need some strength in your hands, but you can do it. And so the regulation is stupid and getting worse and worse. Now they have COVID. Now they ask you a COVID passport and so forth. In India, there is an example. In Delhi, they treated people with Invectin. And that worked as well as the vaccine. The mortality rate was reduced and so forth. So these whole lockdowns is an unbelievable crime against small businessmen. They've been bankrupted.
Absolutely.
And the government never thinks. I give you an example.
Sure.
You lock down, then you lock down schools and kindergartens, okay? So what happens? Some kindergartens, they go bankrupt because they are not well financed. So the cost for the others go up. After the lockdown or during the lockdown, one of the parents in Europe and in America, most married couples, two people go and work. So with the lockdown of schools, one parent has to stay at home if he has children between 2 and 8 years old. So only one breadwinner. The other one has to stop working. Then they reopen the kindergartens, but the parent that stays home says to himself, the kindergarten costs now that much more, in some cases 30–40% more. Is it worth my while to go and work to pay for the kindergarten for my children, or shall I stay home? And then they also think, is it worth sending my children to schools that are run by socialists who tell everything that we believe in private property, that this should be abolished and replaced by a social system where the abolition of private property is the priority?
Noted your points, Dr. Faber, and that comes to my last question. We have been discussing a lot about, the finance, sustainability. You also shared your remarkable views, but going ahead, give me your outlook, give me your guidance. How do you see the sustainable finance, taking place in next 3 to 5 years? Do you think that the BFSI companies, as well as the industries, regulators, the government will, work together to make sustainable finance successful, to make green finance successful, because that is a need of the hour? Do you think so?
Well, they work together. Where it's good to have industries and governments work together. It's a debatable issue because we have something also called fascism, which is essentially a marriage between private sector and the government. So I have some reservations about this. But I'm concerned about people and their lives and about their investments. I tell you, if I were young people, I would buy some property in the countryside. I think you need to be prepared that things will get bad, that lockdowns are coming. At least if you have a small piece of land in the countryside and the house, you can be kind of self-sufficient, because I guarantee you, these shortages we see today, this may be the appetizer of what is going to happen one day, that the agricultural products don't reach the cities anymore, that people have nothing to eat. It's been here in history already many times, nothing new. Nothing is new. Only governments, they have no clue. They're not interested in history. They know everything better.
Okay. But
Whereby I have to give credit. The Indian central bankers are the most academic ones. They know much more than our Western central bankers, who are just money printing apprentices, nothing else.
thank you for that note, Dr. Faber. But again, is the future going to be green for the finance, or it will take some time?
It will be green for some people in finance. I think the whole monetary system will change. I think the dollar will no longer be the reserve currency of the world. It will be replaced. My concern is peace. The Americans have always been very good at creating trouble around the world, whether it was Vietnam or Afghanistan or Syria, always out to create frictions among different people and wars. That's their business, war. And I think Asia has a great future. I wouldn't worry at all about it, except for the interventions by Americans. I've seen it in Hong Kong with the demonstrations. After Hong Kong belonged to China, well understood, it was a sovereign country under England before, and after 97, the sovereignty moved to China. So anything that a foreign power does in Hong Kong is an intervention into the Chinese economy and Chinese political system. That the Americans don't seem to realize.
Right.
But they don't seem to realize many things.
Yes. Yes, Dr. Faber, thank you so much for sharing your perspective here, not only on the green finance or sustainable finance, but also on the economy as a whole. We really appreciate your sharp comments, and I really admire and appreciate your time with PT Global Town Hall.
My pleasure.
Thank you, sir.